Hi, good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to San Francisco Ballet's Points of View lecture series. I'm Jasmine Yepwin. I'm the Associate Director of Education at San Francisco Ballet. On behalf of everyone at SF Ballet, thank you for joining us for the 6th Points of View lecture this 2022 season. We are thrilled to be back in the Opera House performing in front of live audiences. So thank you for staying with us throughout the pandemic and supporting us both in person in the Opera House as well as online through our virtual programs in the Education Department and for audience engagement programs. This season, we're pleased to have Points of View lectures available on Facebook Live and on YouTube before every Wednesday evening performance. Before the pandemic, we did Points of View live in the Opera House on the War Memorial Opera House stage on those Wednesday evening performances. So in continuing in that tradition, we'll offer a new Points of View lecture every Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time before a performance. And those recordings will be available through the end of the 2022 season. So I encourage you to take a look at our YouTube channel and view the other Points of View lectures from the 22 season. For a full list of the schedule of Points of View, please visit us online at sfballet.org/events. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. This event is streaming on Facebook Live and on YouTube, so we might have time for questions and comments from our online audiences towards the end of the discussion. As our panelists cannot see the questions or comments as they are coming in, we will have a staff member reviewing these comments and passing those questions along for the relevant discussion. Additionally, when commenting in the live chat, we respectfully request that everyone abide by our community guidelines, which can be found in the link in the chat. Today's Points of View celebrates artistic director and principal choreographer Helgi Tomasson's new work, Harmony. It runs through Saturday, April 16th. Today's Points of View about Harmony will be a discussion with artistic director and principal choreographer Helgi Tomasson, ballet master Tina LeBlanc, and moderated by Mary Wood. Harmony is Helgi's final ballet as artistic director before he retires, and a little bit about how it was created in the fall of 2020. After months of dancing separately in their own homes and living rooms and kitchens, dancers came back into the studios, and it was glorious, exciting, and safe. To minimize contact, the 80 dancers in the company were divided into 4 pods, and Harmony came out of the time in the studio that Helgi had with one of those dancer pods. It's a hopeful look forward in an uncertain moment of time. Mary Wood is going to be introducing Helgi and Tina, and so I'd like to introduce Mary with her bio. Mary Wood received a BFA from University of Utah, and she performed for 9 years with Ballet West under the directorship of Willem Christensen. After relocating to San Francisco in 1975, she taught children's and adult ballet technique and ballet history at San Francisco Ballet School. She pioneered the Dance in Schools program and was the principal lecturer for community outreach efforts during the 1980s. She has moderated the Points of View program since 1986 and the Meet the Artist interviews since 1995. She frequently participates as a guest lecturer in various audience engagement programs, and we are so lucky to have Mary with our programs across many aspects of San Francisco Ballet's adult and audience engagement programming and youth as well. I'm really looking forward to this discussion about Harmony, and I hope all of our viewers are too. So Helgi and Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. And Mary, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jasmine. As always, it's a special privilege to be in conversation with the team that makes the magic happen at San Francisco Ballet, and today especially with ballet master Tina LeBlanc, and with artistic director and principal choreographer Helgi Tomasson. Brief introductions of each of you. I'll start with Tina. Tina LeBlanc trained at Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet and went on to dance with Joffrey II and the Joffrey Ballet before joining San Francisco Ballet as a principal dancer in 1992. You can do some math there. Her repertory included all of the leading roles of the classical canon in Helgi Tomasson's Giselle, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, Romeo and Juliet, Nutcracker, and the Tomasson-Kosakoff Don Quixote. She created roles in works by Tomasson, Mark Morris, Christopher Wheeldon, among others, and performed in works by George Balanchine, William Forsythe, Jerome Robbins, to name just a few. Her honors include 2 Isadora Duncan Dance Awards and the Princess Grace Statuette Award. In 2009, Tina retired from performing and joined the faculty of the San Francisco Ballet School, moving on to become a ballet master for the company in 2019, all the while raising a couple of boys as a working mom. Awesome. So welcome, Tina, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary.
I've had the incredible privilege of introducing Helgi Tomasson many times over these 37 years. And the expression is trite, but true. An introduction is hardly needed. However, briefly, Helgi's a native of Iceland. He trained there and in Denmark. He landed in New York at the School of American Ballet, then performed with both Joffrey and then Harkness companies. In 1969, he took the silver medal in the first annual Moscow Ballet competition. He then enjoyed 15 years as a celebrated dancer at New York City Ballet. His retirement from performing and taking the San Francisco Ballet directorship happened virtually simultaneously in 1985. And here we are, 37 years later, which makes him, I believe, the longest tenured artistic director, certainly of San Francisco Ballet, and indeed of any ballet company in America. So welcome, Helgi, and thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
As we get started in conversation, I thought I would start with Helgi. Not all artistic directors choreograph. Was including principal choreographer in your title part of your early negotiations for this job? And even backing up from that, how did actually making dances, choreographing start for you?
I had started choreographing just before I came to San Francisco. And when I signed my contract here with the San Francisco Ballet's board, I said I would be very interested in keep going choreographically, choreograph every year, 1 or 2 works. And they were absolutely fine with that. I don't remember when that title, principal choreographer, came in, but somewhere along the way, it got added in there. But yes, I have choreographed a lot of ballets for the company and done the full lengths, like you mentioned, Giselle, Swan Lake, and Romeo and Juliet, Sleeping Beauty, Nutcracker, besides a lot of smaller works for sort of for the occasion of galas that were needed to feature dancers. And so, yes, I have been choreographing for a long time.
I think the record shows 50 works for SFB, 55 works is what's listed on a poster I saw somewhere. Interestingly, a few works you actually very few you created on other companies, but notably the work that we're doing this week, Prism, excuse me, which was actually created for New York City Ballet.
That's correct, yes, yes.
But it came here very shortly after, as I recall.
Yes, it was something that I asked Peter Martins, who was the director of the New York City Ballet at that time. I would be very interested if I could, bring that ballet to our company, and he said absolutely, no problem with that. So, and that's being performed this week. That's nice. It's been that was created in 2000 for New York City Ballet.
Moving to Tina, retirement looks different on different dancers. Reflecting on the trajectory of your career from young ballerina to mature ballerina, How long were you actually at the Joffrey companies? Or you came here?
Well, a total of 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I was in the Joffrey 2 for just under a year and a half. And then about 8 years with the company when I approached Helgi. Said, knock, 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 let me in.
I seem to remember you arrived here right about the time that there was a cover article about you on Dance Magazine. That was
Yeah, I seem to remember. Yeah, the picture that they picked was a group of us in various costumes from the rep at that time. And it was one of those long photo shoots that just seemed to be taking forever. And of course, the picture they picked, I did not look very happy. I didn't look, everybody else looked good. I didn't look so good in that picture. And somebody was like, oh, she's ready to leave.
well.
And I was glad to have her here.
Thanks.
Then you had a 17-year run as a ballerina here. You came as a principal, you inhabited all of the principal repertoire, and then on retirement, you chose to begin teaching. And I wonder if you could just say a word or two about how important the art of the teacher is to you and in general.
Yeah. Well, I was brought up that way. In the small school that I was from, it was small at the time. Our teacher could not be everywhere. And so we had, I think, 1 or 2 other teachers, but basically she would have the advanced kids teach the other classes when she couldn't be there. So, you know, I've been teaching since I was 14. And when I left, I had the opportunity here and there to come back and teach or teach master classes here and there. But I always knew that I wanted to pass it on, especially after having danced for so long and gone through the process of trying to make things better, always looking to make things better. And you learn a lot about the body. And when you turn it around and put it on other people, I find that fascinating. You know, I understand what's in my body. I understand what makes me work, but to try to figure out or find the key to help somebody else find out how they work always fascinated me. And yeah, it spent 10 years in the studio with students just trying to find keys for each one of them. And yeah, that was fun for me.
And then finally, the work of the ballet master seemed to come to you. What was that evolution from teacher to ballet master?
Well, as a teacher in the school, every year we would do a showcase in which you would have that chance to kind of be the ballet master of a piece or two, or share a piece. And I think the first time I set something was actually Helgi's Beads of Heart, what was that? Beads of Memory. Yes.
It's a memory.
Yep. And I set that on our students. And so that was my first introduction of trying to learn something off of a video, and you know, not really having any notes, asking people who might have been involved, and then going, oh, that was too long ago, I don't remember. So really just learning it off the video, and then having Helgi come and give his final stamp on it, you know. And that was fun because it was something different for me. And then along the way, the last few years, Helgi let me ballet master here and there. I think my first thing in the company was Ruby's, which I had danced many times. And then a few other things before I actually came on board.
Well, I want to hear more about actual ballet mastering when we've gotten a little further along and we're talking about the ballet harmony. But as I said, retiring from performing looks different on different dancers. And it's interesting that you have chosen this particular trajectory. And as we were saying earlier, never say never about just about anything else that might come along. As we are moving ahead here to put this season's premiere work, Harmony, in context, let's look back at the actual time that it was created and the so-called trials and tribulations that appeared in our advertising for this evening's program. So it's March 6th, 2020. The company is premiering this fantastic production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. I happened to be in the audience. It was amazing. And then comes this unbelievable announcement. The Opera House is closing. Did you have any inkling How did that news come to you, Helgi?
No, it was a big surprise. But I mean, I remember that evening during the performance, there was some rumors flying around that had been picked up from the city hall that we might be closed down. And sure enough, that was confirmed very shortly afterwards. And it was kind of devastating because this was, like you said, an opening night premiere of Midsummer Night's Dream of Balanchine, which we had not performed, I believe, close to 30 years, somewhere around 30 years. It's a beautiful work, and it was multicast, for the principals, and they were, of course, devastated. The ones who had not danced that opening night, they had put in all that work, and then being told that they were not going to have an opportunity to perform it live. So it was sort of the worst news you could receive during a performance.
Well, I've tried to imagine myself as the fly on the Zoom room wall when the artistic staff was then meeting over the next few days, trying to imagine how you were trying to cope. And what were those conversations? What did those conversations have to be about in those first weeks or so?
Well, first was, I think we tried to make sure that if there was any way we could capture a performance, film it.
Mhm.
And we were allowed by the Opera House to come in, with, of course, no audiences, to capture the work. I mean, like, was it a couple of days later or something like that? And that was very rewarding for us because then that was streamed.
Mhm.
And people saw this beautiful work of Balanchine. But right after that, it was like, how long are we going to be closed down? Is it a couple of weeks? Is it 3 weeks? Is it a month? Nobody knew at that time. So this was like, okay, so we lose this program, but let's get ready for rehearsing the next one. And little by little, we've discovered that we couldn't even be in our own building because everything closed down and we were all being sheltered at home, as everybody remembers. And then it became like a big concern of how do the dancers stay in shape? They're not allowed to come to the studio. They're at home in their living rooms and kitchen trying to stay in shape. That was really tough for them. And of course, the further on this went on, we realized that this is not going to be over in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. This is going to last, unfortunately, quite a long time. So we canceled the rest of the season. And it was not until the summer that we were allowed to come 6 dancers at a time into the studio, masked, and had to stay basically 10 feet away from one another and taking class, which was very well received by the dancers, even though they were only 6 there, because having been trying to stay in shape in their apartments, at least they had a studio, and they that was like really home to them. They could move around and jump around, and slowly we were allowed to increase that number, I think, to 10, and little by little we were allowed to. We given permission, we could start rehearsing, which meant we could start, partnering and touch one another in the sense of, holding one's hands and partnering.
Can I just interrupt to ask, how long was that being away? And then when were the dancers actually allowed back in? We're talking from March to
well, it was middle of the summer, August. I remember we were.
August. That's a long time to just be. Tina, did you teach any of those Zoom classes?
I did. I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We took turns.
And in the beginning, with only 6 dancers, we provide classes all day long to get through the whole company.
I
70.
wonder how that would work. Yeah.
And we streamed the classes from, with a teacher in one studio to the other studios, other 2 or 3 studios. So there would be 6, 6, and 6. But still, we had to do this all day long to get through the whole company.
That's just amazing. And then also just the physical layout of the building. The dancers then obviously couldn't interact in, say, their common dressing areas.
That's right, they couldn't. So we have to stagger the classes. So in a sense that when one class started, the other classes could use their dressing room to get changed and that type of thing. And they would all finish at a different time. They could not mingle, they could not meet with their friends, depending on what pod you have been assigned to. And at that time we had, by September, we had 4 pods.
Okay, so by September.
Yeah.
But Helgi, I think for a short time there, they weren't even allowed to use the dressing rooms. They had to come with their clothing underneath, whatever they were wearing.
From home.
And to leave exactly like that. Just put their clothes back on and out.
They had to go home and not in the building.
Question that I've heard and heard different hypotheses. Where did the actual rules come from? Because we all sat here at home watching TV and we knew the CDC was saying this, and then the governor would get on and say something else. What sort of chain of direction were you obligated to follow? What about the union? Did AGMA have its own set of rules?
AGMA had its own say in a way, but the Opera House is owned by the city of San Francisco. We had to listen to the health department of San Francisco, and they are the one that called the shots of, could we be in the theater? No, we could not at that time. How would we behave in our own studios, pods, no mingling? And of course, the dancers union want to keep everybody healthy. So they had their own say about what they felt was right or we shouldn't do or could do. So it came from sort of multi-sources, but mainly from the city's health department.
Yeah, wow. So kind of, that just sets this bizarre scene. I wondered if either of you could just recall any particular moment when you are recounting this years from now, and you can say, oh, remember the time when, is there something that just jumps out as a memory? Tina, were you able to conjure up anything?
A few things. We had gotten the okay to film Emeralds, and it was the strangest thing, first of all, having gone through the process of the small pods into slightly bigger pods into being able to rehearse. And now we were talking about capturing something on the stage. No, it wasn't Emeralds. It was the gala. Because we were backwards. They had closed off the front of the house and we were facing the patch. We were facing backwards. So it was a little bit smaller. And we were going through all the different pieces that were being recorded for this gala. And you could only be on the stage if you were involved in that particular piece. And once the dancers took off their masks, we had to not only have our masks on, we had to have face shields on. So we looked like aliens. I think I got a picture of Helgi and I and Ricardo just all covered up, protecting ourselves and protecting them as they were maskless, doing this capture. But it was we were just grabbing at straws, I feel like, trying to do everything we could to keep going, to keep the dancers interested and in shape and maintain a presence with the public. It was just crazy. We got Zoom out of this. Who knew about Zoom before all this?
No kidding. Yeah, I don't know, Helgi, did you think of a special anecdote? Because we can move on to the fact that you had to create the 2021 season out of thin air. Speaking of Zoom. And then there were guest choreographers that began to appear. And this is sort of winding our way to a segue to talking about harmony. But I'm very curious to know how, for instance, an international choreographer like Christopher Wheeldon even was able to come to the States. How did that happen?
Well, we started, as you might recall, of making short films
Mhm.
outside. And we created one film where I had asked 4 different choreographers to, choreograph and something very short outdoors. And Christopher Wheeldon was one of them. Mill PA was another one.
That's right.
And when we could do that, that just was such a boost to the morale. At least we can dance outside without masks. And that sort of started the idea of choreographers could maybe create works over Zoom. And actually, this one film that we created, 2 of the choreographers were in New York and one was in Los Angeles. I think 3 of them in New York and 1 was in Los Angeles. It's something that I would not attempt to do. I need to have the people in front of me, the dancers. But there are some choreographers who were able to do that, and they did it quite well. So, and I felt that we are known for being a very creative company, so it was important to keep that in line of work, visible and continue that not only for the dancer's sake, but also from an audience point, that even though we were sheltering in place and being in pods and being under very difficult circumstances, we were still able to create.
The reality that you could plan a 2022 season back in the theater, can you remember the moment when that was actually real, when somebody said, yes, we can do it? When would that have been?
Well, it was always, are we going to be able to do it?
Mhm.
Are they going to not allow us in the theater? And when that finally came, that everybody had to be masked and vaccinated, that was huge. I mean, we were thrilled, and
Mhm.
we're just hoping that the audience would feel secure enough and comfortable enough to come and see us, which they did.
And you had then, of course, made the announcement of your retirement and curating. We actually did speak a year ago about this, and you curated a season that would include everything that you've been known for, the classics and new works, many of your own works, and new choreographies. And I remember running into a dancer somewhere and saying, oh, well, we've been working with Dwight Roden. And I remember thinking to myself, really? I mean, that's real. That's like the old times. And so just kind of reflect a little bit about that creating period. You say you had 4 pods. You were able to assign a choreographer to each pod. That's kind of like putting puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, well, I had 3 choreographers coming in.
Mhm.
So they involved 3 pods.
Mhm.
And then that left the 4th pod without a choreographer, anything new. And of course, the dancers who were in that pod, were a little sad that there was nothing happening for them to work on, anything new. So that's when I said to myself, well, maybe I should just do something. And so I used those people who were in that pod that was assigned to me, and that was the beginning of Harmony.
It's fascinating to me that we have a company of 80, give or take, dancers. No one of those pods would come up short of a great dancer. And I think that's pretty exciting just to think about. And you have this group. And so that really is a great segue to talking about Harmony itself. So looking at it kind of with 2 parallel tracks, you are known for being the choreographer for the company, and you've created many, many works over all these years, and you say to yourself, I'm going to do a piece, and you go into the studio and there's a piece. And we'll call that your kind of typical process, if possible. And so then here's this process. And I wonder if you were able to proceed pretty much as you normally would, or if the fact that you were in these really extraordinary circumstances kind of affected how you created this time around.
This was not, it was far from normal for me, because normally I would say, when I have been choreographing during those past years, many past years, I usually had to give time first to the choreographers who were coming visiting.
Mhm.
And I would end up with sort of the least amount of time, or the time was left over. So this time, being that I had a pod to myself, that was really a luxury, because I didn't have to share those dancers with anybody, and another choreographer, because they were not allowed to mingle. And so that was very different. You know, I felt, how can I say, it sounds very strange, but like, these are my dancers.
Yeah.
You know, this pod belongs to me, and I can take the time I need, because they can't go to any other choreographer and work. So in many ways, this was not the normal for me. It was kind of a luxury to have.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. And a rare one. Talk about how the music came to you. How did that come about?
It's not a long story. The company was performing in Paris years ago, and as I would normally do when I, being in London or New York or Paris, I would go to music shops and shop for CDs, and go through and look at them and buy. Just sometimes I didn't know what I was buying, but I would buy a whole bunch of CDs and to listen to them. And I remember Martin West, we had gone together, and I was sort of asking him advice about this composer and one. And there was some Rameau music. And if I'm not mistaken, I think in the shop they were playing some of the Rameau. And I kind of caught my ear and said, I could do something to that. So I bought a few CDs of his music and took them home. And like sometimes happens, you don't have the time, or it's not the right time, or you should have put it on the shelf. And so when this opportunity with the fourth pod came along, I said, well, maybe I should revisit that composer and listen again. In the meantime, I had been made aware of an Icelandic pianist, international known pianist, that played a lot of Rameau and Bach, Debussy, I think. So I started listening to his playing Rameau, and it was just beautiful. And I sort of fell in love with it, and I thought, absolutely, this is a music I'm going to use. So that's how that came about.
That's, well, I should have lived 300 years ago, but I just loved the music. I think I responded to the piece in large part because of the music. You had this group of dancers, and they were kind of the ones you ended up with. And so you have often said that you created for a particular dancer that came along at a certain time. This is almost more like an assignment of dancers, not necessarily the ones you would have gone out and chosen, but I'm intrigued by the sort of the inspiration that you got from the dancers that were in the room.
I think hardly, I'm always driven by the music. It influences me a lot. But I think in this case, these were the dancers I had. They were so thrilled to be in doing something in the studio and being choreographed on, that it was their enthusiasm was infectious, and I really enjoyed working with them and finding right steps for each one that would be different from, so that shows their personalities. And of course, it was great to have Tina in the studio helping me there and keeping notes and because it's hard when you're not. This was not the big studio that I had. It was a Tenenbaum studio, and sometimes when you have 20 people in the studio, they feel very close, and yet at that time we were trying to keep a distance, with the masks and everything. So it's hard to keep a track of everything. So Tina was so good at saying, "Oh, so and so, is that arm the right, or do you? I think they're doing the wrong arm for you." Or, it was great to have her there.
That's a nice little toss to Tina. Just to talk a little bit about ballet mastering in general. Most of our audience, I'm sure, is pretty familiar. They've heard these talks before, but your role in the room with a choreographer creating, as opposed to being in the room with a work that's being revived or something like that. So here you are with your notepad, as Helgi has said. Talk about your work as ballet master and talk a little bit about kind of how you felt about harmony as it was evolving.
Well, I think like the dancers, I was just thrilled to be in the studio and working and seeing Helgi create again. It was just like the thrill of it being the first time almost, because it had been so long and we were so starved for all of that kind of attention. But as a ballet master, I find my notebook at first is quite full of chicken scratchings and little odd notes or little odd counts or question marks. What about this? What about that arm? Check on this. And through the process of learning it and fine tuning it, they get neater. I do them several times over, which is probably a waste of time, but just to keep it straight in my mind, I like to revisit them and clean them up, make sure I understand what I actually wrote, and can learn from it if I were to just read it. It is hard because as the choreographer is creating, it changes a lot. Sometimes immediately it's, oh no, that doesn't work. Or sometimes it's like, well, try it this way. We'll try it that way. Can we go back to the other way? And there's lots of back and forth. So I try not to write too much until we've actually got something that the choreographer is pretty pleased with, and then go back and really do it for good. Always with enough space for changes if they come along later. And yeah, it's a lot. I find that it's a little bit harder than doing it in your body when you're trying to learn everybody's role, and it's a lot more mental and visual than when you're learning your own part and it's in your body.
Right.
It's a different attack.
Exactly. Here's a question for you. Is there a role in harmony that you would like to have danced?
Yes.
No.
Misa's, of course.
With all those turns.
Oh, all the turns and the spitfire and the the changes of direction and then the pas de deux, so passionate. Yes, that role for sure.
That pas de deux is just, well, and anyway, we've said there's just so much hard dancing in the piece, and I think, Helgi, that's probably a consequence of you having so much time to spend on it. You could just make it harder and harder every day. I have a question for you, Helgi, and that is, you've talked often about choreographing to your dancers, individual dancers' strengths, and you're working with an extraordinary field of male dancers, both present and have in the past. Do you ever imagine yourself creating a work for the 1969 Helgi who went to Moscow? Can you see yourself in any of the roles you've created?
I don't think so. I think when I started out 30 some years ago here, and I was choreographing, I could move pretty well, still, and show what I wanted. So in many ways, I would imagine it would be like, this is what I would have liked to have done. Or this step I would have like, I like that kind of thing because I could still visually, feel it physically. As the time went on, it involves, and you start saying, no, it's not about me anymore.
Yeah.
It's about that dancer in front of me and what is their strength and weaknesses. How can I make them look the best they can? What suits them? What looks good on them? And that's why I think I don't mind when people are sharing a role, let's say first or second or third cast or whatever it is. If there is something that it doesn't suit that person doing the second cast or the third cast, I'm not opposed to making a change to make that look better for them. And I think that's something that just comes with understanding more choreography and what you want to say and how you want that work to come out. But it's not about me anymore. No, I don't choreograph the way I would have liked to have danced. I might look at some male dancers today and in a few years ago, how incredibly great dancers they were, and maybe say to myself, gosh, that would have been fun if I could have danced it that well or something to that point. But I really appreciate and I admire that they're dancing. As for making it hard, I don't deliberately set it out to be hard, but I think also that maybe comes from Balanchine. Balanchine, it was not easy to dance. And I think you grew as a dancer. He made great dancers. And his choreography was challenging. And maybe indirectly, unconsciously, I may be doing a little bit the same thing, having been influenced by that. But I don't set out, I'm going to create a solo. I'm going to make it as hard as possible. No, I don't start that way. I just feel that step suits that musical phrase. And then I look at the dancer and I say, oh, wow, they could do that so beautifully. Let's see how that works.
Right. Well, I'm keeping an eye on the time and we're winding up to very soon, our closing. So just a couple more sort of general questions. This one for Helgi. We know, and you've spoken about creating works for your dancers and the dancers that are in your company and how that has evolved over all these years. Have you given any thought to the desire to do more choreography in the future that's just generic choreography? I have an idea for a dance. I'm going to go find some dancers and create. Has that even crossed your mind in these last months?
But before I did start on harmony, I hadn't choreographed for about 3 or 4 years, 4 years, I think.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, this opportunity, this music, this pod with those dancers just fell into my lap. So immediately I said, yes, I have to do something. And who knows, maybe that opportunity similar might happen in the future, but I don't make plans like that. I just, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, then so be it.
And then just reiterate for us, I think most of us have read the various interviews and articles that have appeared and heard what you have said over the last year. As you move into retirement, is there a special plan that you have to do something or to do nothing?
Well, first part of the plan, if I want to plan anything, I usually don't like to plan it. Things sort of evolve. Is to go and visit my grandchildren who are living in Europe, and we haven't seen them for now almost 2.5 years. So that would be the first thing on my agenda. After that, I don't know.
And I do understand that you began the plans for a 2023 season that will involve some new works. And I'm hopeful that your hand will show through when we are presented with a 2023 season. I don't know if there's anything you can say at this point, but
well, I felt that I had mentioned to the board of directors that during the pandemic, we need to come back with something really strong to let people know that we have survived this, and show people that we are one of the most creative ballet company in the world. So we have to come back as strong as we can and let people know we are back, and we are not going to stop being creative. So this is why I spoke to the board, and they agreed with me that we should have a festival in 23 with 9 choreographers, and create a festival. So we will see what happens.
we will, and boy, are we looking forward. I'm going to ask Jasmine to jump back. If there are any questions in our last 35 seconds, have any questions appeared that you think we should try to answer?
We don't have any questions, and if we did, we don't have any time for them, but we don't have any questions at the moment from the audience.
I didn't leave any time. Well, then I will have to say my thank yous. Tina, thank you for the last 30 years and many more to come, I hope, as you mentor the next generation and embody the passing on of the legacy of our art. And Helgi, I believe that this season has fulfilled your hope stated last year to craft a culmination or a summary, if you will, of your 37 years and that time you've poured into this company. And I know I speak for many, many others when I say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome.
Being with us this evening.
Been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this beautiful, wonderful, and thoughtful conversation. Thank you, Helgi. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Mary. It's always so great to hear your stories and your memories, but also the difficult journey that it took for Harmony to find its way to the Opera House stage for the glorious premiere last week. It really is, when you don't have an opportunity for 2 years to be an audience member, or it's really a wonderful thing to have something like this. And I can't imagine what the journey was, even as you described it, for the dancers and everyone involved in bringing Harmony to the stage. So thank you for giving us a little insight about, from March 6, 2020 to last week premiere. Go see Harmony, everyone. Thank you for this discussion, especially Helgi, for the gift of Harmony and all that you've given to dancers and artists, Bay Area audiences around the globe over the past 37 years who have discovered new things to love and embrace and cherish about ballet, and San Francisco Ballet specifically. So thank you for all that you have shared and given to this art form. And Tina, thank you as well for sharing on stage and now as a ballet master. For all of our online viewers, thank you for watching and listening to this Points of View lecture. And thank you for your support of San Francisco Ballet. I hope you have an opportunity to see Harmony or to see it again. And I hope you'll join us for Helgi's farewell gala performance on April 24th and Swan Lake, which closes the 2022 season, which opens on April 29th. Please visit our website at sfballet.org for more information about the 22 rep season. On behalf of everyone at San Francisco Ballet, we wish you and your family good health, and thank you for being with us during this time. I'll see you at the ballet. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.